Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Our current session is about LTM and constraints in Pakistan. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to understand LTM related constraints in the Pakistani context. Well, my dear students, there are many constraints which include inadequate resources, overcrowded classes, unenthusiastic teachers, and language policy that is hinged on by religious, cultural, social, and political circumstances. Each of these constraints is of its own significance and has its own crucial aspects. When it comes to inadequate resources, well, being a developing country, being a country that does not have enough resources otherwise, when it comes to language teaching, of course, the availability of resources becomes a huge challenge. Especially in the rural areas, it's a huge challenge, especially in the public sector schooling and public sector higher education, it becomes a huge problem. Overcrowded classes. Yes, there is a very limited number of our young learners who go to schools, but it is very, very unfortunate that the resources are so less that they have to be accommodated in a very limited number of classes. The result is that the classrooms are overcrowded. And this is not only the situation in the schools, this is also a situation in the public sector, universities, where a class of 70 to 80 students is considered to be an average class. When it comes to language teaching and learning, of course, dealing with this huge number of students creates its own problems, and the processes of language learning and teaching cannot be performed adequately. As far as the language policy is concerned, that is again a constraint on LTM because of the religious, cultural, social, and political circumstances. The choice of language, the nature of the lessons that would be used in the classroom, etc., they are all highly influenced. According to Mackey, although there has been a preference for particular methods at different times, methods often continue in some form long after they have fallen out of favor. And I would at this point say that this is the case in Pakistan, where, for example, grammar translation method that has become obsolete in most of the parts of the world is still used in the classroom, though it is not practically used in the rest of the world. Pakistani English language teachers, especially the public sector schooling, where in the rural areas, the public sector school teachers are teaching, they still stick to the same method. This observation is still true with grammar translation method that, as Mackey has said, is alive in Pakistan. And according to him, it is followed in some other parts of the world as well. According to Warsi 1994, ELT methodology in Pakistan is not based on a needs-based approach in the classroom, as it does not utilize authentic materials to develop students' reflective and communicative skills. So this is another constraint on the teaching and learning of English in Pakistan. The needs analysis is not carried out. If it is carried out, it is not performed adequately. If it is performed, to some extent, it is not used adequately to design the curriculum. If it is somehow reflected in the curriculum, it is not translated into the textbooks, which ultimately, they reach to the hands of the teacher. So the result is that authentic materials are not used, real life materials are not used to teach English, with the result that the students do not learn language that can be used to perform communicative functions in everyday life. It is noted that teachers in Pakistani universities deliver lectures using bilingual instructional methods. Those who are involved in the management and administration of higher education institutions in Pakistan or of universities, they know it very well that it is a constant struggle to monitor and to motivate the teachers to use English as a language of instruction in the classroom. A lot of teachers find it very convenient to switch to Urdu for the purposes of teaching. As far as communication between teachers and students is concerned, it occurs in Urdu or in the regional languages such as Sindhi, Punjabi, etc. Not only outside the classroom, but most of the times in the classroom as well. Here what I mean is that bilingualism in itself is not something negative. Bilingualism is something that can be used as a strength. It is not strictly prohibited to use a word or two or some words from your native language, from your first language, or from, for example, Urdu in an English classroom. However, bilingualism should be used as a strength, and in the bilingual education, the students who learn in the classroom, the focus should be that the technical knowledge is provided, or the core knowledge that is shared about the subject, it should be in English. According to Hornberger's view, bilingual education through the bilingual textbooks, expressive writing from students in mixed codes, and oral code switching between teachers and students in the classroom can develop important communicative and thinking skills. So as I said earlier, bilingualism should be carefully and smartly used by the teachers as a positive resource and as a positive aspect or as a strength. As far as teaching methodology in Pakistan is concerned, Nunan 2006 believes that the dominant approach to language teaching in Asia has been and remains a synthetic one which is unnatural, as it does not take into account the fact that L2 should be taught naturally like L1 acquisition. The way you learn your first language, L2 should be taught in the same way. Whereas in the Pakistani classrooms, it does not happen so. Rather, abstractions or structures in isolation are taught. Teachers who have learned their own languages through synthetic approach see this as something normal or as a logical way of teaching and learning a language. So, the way they learned themselves, they believe they should teach in the same way. They are not ready to accept, the new possibilities or innovations. It is also observed that teachers tend to revert to methods they know to be effective in rendering the situation manageable. Now, this is bitter but a ground reality that teachers find it handy, they find it easier to use the tested, the used, already in place methods, and they are not ready to make experiments. They teach the way they were taught by their own teachers, and the teacher in Pakistan is not convinced about the strategies or methods he or she is exposed to, but uses them because the experts say so. So in a typical Pakistani English classroom, grammar translation method, GTM, is used. Creative skills are ignored. Stress is laid on rules, especially the grammar rules, the structural rules, and linguistic needs are not catered for. Regarding academic writing, for example, it is observed that English is taught as a second language and writing is a compulsory skill. In fact, the students have to take their examination in written form, and during the whole period of education, students face great difficulty to express themselves even in writing. What does it mean? It means that the only skill that is focused throughout the academic career of a student is the writing skill. And still, unfortunately, it is so poor, I would say generally speaking, that an average Pakistani student would find it very, very difficult to express himself or herself in English language.